say is this, is Sonny, you guys thought that abortion was going to be this like quasi-zealot religious issue? I'm pro-life. If people in the audience aren't, that's fine. What I'm saying though, what gives me promise, and I think we can all agree on this, is that there are other issues that should animate and drive our politics other than this very divisive one. And I was really encouraged by that, Megan. Very encouraged, because the media was forcing this as an up or down vote on a referendum on a highly complicated, very emotional, very personal issue. And it turned out the American people were like, yeah, actually, these other 6 things matter more.
So, Charlie, do you accept the View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis. But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it. And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last week.
Popular daytime talk show, a confident TV host, and a group of students suddenly caught in the middle of a firestorm. It all began when the View Eyes, the show in question, decided to take a shot at Turning Point USA, a conservative student organization, but they didn't stop there. They went further and criticized more than 5,000 young people who attended the group's event, including teenagers, high school students, and college students, many of whom traveled across the country at their own expense just to listen to speakers discuss politics and values.
Charlie Kirk took issue with this depiction of his organization. Kirk maintains that Turning Point USA is not affiliated with anti-Semitism or white supremacist. In a strongly worded tweet, the 28-year-old stated, "Talking to lawyers, many think we have a strong case. You cannot smear minors as and get away with it. It impacts them for the rest of their life. Hashtag sue the View." That's when TPUSA went all in. The organization changed its profile pic on Twitter to hashtag sue the View, posted a number of tweets condemning The View and demanding an apology.
Then came the moment that ignited the controversy live on air, when The View suggested that these students might somehow be associated with neo-Nazi groups, which wasn't just a careless remark, it was like dropping a media grenade. Charlie Kirk, the leading figure behind Turning Point USA, didn't brush this off, and it wasn't simply about himself being criticized. He was outraged that thousands of young people, most of them under 21, were being publicly smeared on national television. And as he put it, these kids now have to carry a public stain tied to a lie, all because someone at ABC made a reckless and damaging statement. He demanded accountability not for his own sake, but for the students who believed in his organization and were now watching their reputations get dragged through the mud. By the way, before we go any further, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and deliver more shocking stories like this. Now, back to the drama. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get more heated, Sunny Hostin decided to double down, and sitting at the table on The View, she didn't limit her comments to political views. Instead, she took direct aim at uneducated white women, stating that a large portion of Donald Trump's support came from women without college degrees. And she followed it with a smug remark that clearly suggested she equates a lack of formal education with a lack of intelligence, which is where things became deeply personal for many viewers. Because let's be honest, not going to college doesn't make someone stupid, and plenty of people watching felt not only dismissed, but directly insulted.
I have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement? I think, Charlie, you could use the money, and your students definitely could too.
And when you're sitting in a $1 million studio sipping coffee on a major network and casually labeling large groups of everyday people, As uneducated, it doesn't come across as brave, it comes across as arrogant. That moment handed Charlie Kirk exactly what he needed, and he wasted no time in using it to his advantage, framing it as the perfect example of what he often calls elitist hypocrisy. A woman with a law degree, speaking on national television, mocking Americans who didn't follow the same educational path as she did, people who work hard, raise families, pay their taxes, and actually show up to vote. And if you were one of those viewers sitting at home, you didn't hear a normal political discussion, you heard someone suggesting that your opinion doesn't count as much simply because you didn't spend tens of thousands of dollars on a college degree. That single moment shifted the entire tone of the controversy, and believe me, things only escalated from there. But here's the twist. Charlie Kirk never even appeared on The View. There was no dramatic entrance, no shouting match across a table, no heated back and forth on set, and he didn't need any of it because instead he responded from an entirely different platform, releasing a full-scale video response that hit like a digital uppercut. With next-level production that was anything but a shaky phone rant in a car. Instead, it was sleek, tightly scripted, packed with sharp edits, intense zooms, and dramatic background music that made it clear he was aiming to make a serious impact. For it looked less like a rebuttal and more like a campaign ad fused with a demolition derby, with every frame crafted to embarrass Sunny Hostin and every sentence sharpened like a dagger, as Kirk didn't just disagree with her views, he set them, ablaze, and hurled them into the algorithm for the internet to devour. The timing couldn't have been more strategic, because just hours after The View aired, Kirk's video was already spreading like wildfire, with Twitter erupting almost instantly, YouTube reaction videos dropping one after another, and TikTok creators remixing clips into 15-second knockout edits. While Sunny was still sitting under the studio lights, Kirk had already seized control of the narrative from an entirely different location, waging what can only be called modern media warfare. And the truth is, he knew exactly how to win, not by relying on facts or fairness, but by unleashing flash, speed, and sheer digital dominance. And perhaps the most unsettling part for The View was that he managed to make her look like she lost a debate he never even physically attended.
Now we begin with a shocking apology just a short time ago from the ladies of The View to Turning Point USA. A war of words broke out after the conservative group was rallying the next generation of voters at its youth summit in Tampa, Florida this weekend. And the liberal panel just couldn't help themselves. The group sent a scathing cease and desist letter after hosts on The View suggested that Turning Point had embraced neo-Nazis who showed up outside the event.
This whole situation wasn't really about who was right, it was about who appeared to be in control, and the moment Kirk's video hit the internet, Sunny Hostin no longer looked like the confident legal analyst viewers were used to seeing. As her posture shifted, her tone grew uncertain, and her smile started to feel forced, which didn't go unnoticed, and definitely not in a good way. The internet has no patience for nuance, and it doesn't wait around for explanations. What it does focus on is how someone handles getting hit, and Sunny looked visibly shaken, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in that quiet, unsettling kind of breakdown where you're trying hard to maintain composure, yet your face keeps giving you away. Her eyes darted toward the teleprompter like it was her only way out. Her voice trembled slightly and her whole demeanor seemed to ask, how did this spiral so fast? Online, the discussion had already moved past politics. Now it was all about her body language, as slowed down clips of her blinking too quickly, fidgeting, and glancing nervously around the set began to spread like wildfire. It was no longer a debate about ideas. It became a battle of optics, and the optics clearly suggested that she got steamrolled.
Turning Point conference, were in the front of out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs, and the I think it's important that every single person that attended that Turning Point, every Republican speak up against these against the flags that were.
Charlie Kirk didn't just tear apart her argument, he shattered the polished armor of her entire media persona, and when a high-profile host like Sunny, known for being composed, experienced, and always camera ready, starts visibly unraveling on live television, that's exactly the kind of content the internet devours without hesitation. And here's where things took a much darker turn. After the on-air comments that linked Turning Point USA's student attendees to neo-Nazis, the organization didn't just express outrage, they went straight to legal action, firing off a cease and desist letter directly to The View, not as a warning or a soft pushback, but as a formal legal threat that made one thing clear: you can't defame 5,000 young people and expect to walk away without consequences. What made the situation even more painful was the effort and sacrifice those students had made just to attend the event, with many of them scraping together funds for flights, spending heavily on gas, and doing everything they could just to be part of something they believed in.
On Monday, we talked about the fact that there were openly demonstrators outside the Florida Student Action Summit of the Turning Point USA group. We want to make clear that these demonstrators were gathered outside the event and that they were not invited or endorsed by Turning Point USA. A Turning Point USA spokesman said the group, quote, 100% condemns those ideologies, and said Turning Point USA security tried to remove the neo-Nazis from the area but could not because they were on public property. Also, Turning Point USA wanted us to clarify that this was a Turning Point USA summit and not a Republican Party event. So we apologize for anything we said that may have been unclear on these points.
But despite all of that, they came. Teenagers and college students from every corner of the country showed up to attend this conservative summit, not to wave hate symbols or cause chaos, but to listen to speakers, be part of a movement, and learn something meaningful. Instead of being acknowledged for their commitment and effort, they were unfairly lumped in with a fringe group that wasn't even inside the event. Kirk made it absolutely clear that Turning Point USA did not invite those extremists. In fact, the organization tried to have them removed but couldn't do anything about it since the protesters were standing on public property. Still, that didn't stop the hosts of The View from using a broad brush to paint all attendees with the same label, and once that false image was broadcast, it stuck. Kirk wasn't about to let that go unanswered. He called it exactly what it was: a deliberate smear.
Welcome back. You know, in Monday's conversation about Turning Point USA, I put the young people at the conference in the same category as the protesters outside. And I don't like it when people make assumptions about me, and it's not any better when I make assumptions about other people, which I did. So my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the state, the U.S.
Over the weekend, Turning Point USA hosted a riveting event in Tampa, Florida called the Student Action Summit. Outside of the event were individuals waving flags and engaged in other activities. Well, on Monday's show, members of The View made a few comments about it.
The conservative group Turning Point USA has condemned the group of neo-Nazis and said they have nothing to do with the organization.
Yeah, but where was DeSantis is what I want to know.
But you let them in.
President, open the
You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit.
And if the media thought they could casually toss out baseless accusations and move on without consequence, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. What came next hit like a wrecking ball, because Sunny Hostin wasn't ambushed, she wasn't interrupted by a fiery guest, and this wasn't some out-of-control live debate segment. It was just her sitting in front of the camera, while the echo of Charlie Kirk's viral video reverberated across every corner of the internet. He didn't need to raise his voice or even appear on the show. His meticulously edited words landed harder than any face-to-face confrontation ever could. While The View leaned on its usual formula, panel talk, a few jabs, and then onto the next topic, Kirk went full scorched earth, dismantling her ideology with ruthless precision as if it owed him rent, and he didn't hold back for a second. He mocked her elitism, tore apart her worldview, and portrayed her as someone completely detached from the real struggles and perspectives of everyday Americans.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
I guess the video didn't just challenge her opinion. It turned Sunny Hostin into a symbol of everything the conservative audience loves to push back against: media privilege, academic snobbery, and a dismissive attitude toward working class Americans, and the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The clip didn't just trend, it took over social media, with comment sections filling up rapidly and reaction channels lighting up like a Christmas tree, as viewers weren't just watching Sunny, they were watching her squirm, and they absolutely reveled in it. The worst part was that she couldn't fight back, at least not effectively, because once the internet turns you into a symbol, into a meme, you stop being seen as a real person. You become a target, and that's exactly what Sunny had become. Then came the headlines, loud, mocking, and impossible to ignore, with phrases like Charlie Kirk's daytime delusion and Sunny Hostin hit with reality brick clogging timelines, while subreddits turned into digital feeding frenzies and TikTok edits zoomed in on her every micro expression. Her blinking, her shifting in her seat, her tight, uneasy smile, all of it was looped, remixed, memed, and shared by the second. And as this online firestorm raged, something strange unfolded on The View itself. The studio energy dropped, the conversations lost momentum, and even the audience seemed unsure of when to clap or when to cringe.
Achievements. How do you like the so-called uneducated now, Sonny?
Yeah, and again, by the way, rarely do you get the answer to a question in the question. And her whole question is exactly why there was a rebellion against them.
Yes.
Listen, just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. I always differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach. I mean, it's or about North African lesbian poetry. Okay, that's fine. I get
You could almost feel the awkward tension slipping through the screen as Sunny, the unshakable and always poised legal commentator, suddenly looked like she was sinking. She wasn't yelling or ranting, and she didn't storm off set. But the unraveling was happening in real time through the sighs, the fidgeting, and the way her confidence cracked with each word. Her calm, commanding presence had been replaced with a discomfort that was impossible to hide, and all the while, Charlie Kirk wasn't anywhere near the studio. He was probably already popping champagne from his digital throne, watching as the internet turned his response into a cultural nuke. He didn't have to dominate the conversation in person, because the internet had already decided this was a takedown, a clean, brutal, meme-fueled takedown, and Sunny was right at the center of it. At this point, it wasn't even about the argument anymore, because Kirk had shifted the focus completely, going after everything she represented: the suit, the degrees, the media training, the polished image of educated authority, and he tore it all down like it was built out of matchsticks. And the way he did it was ruthless, dropping another video even more over the top with dramatic music, flashy graphics, and slow zooms on Sunny's face. And it looked like a movie trailer for a political takedown. But underneath all the edits, the message was crystal clear. People like Sunny, the polished liberal voices on daytime TV, don't speak for regular Americans, and they never did. The impact was instant, as viewers didn't just repost the video, they turned it into reaction content, with YouTubers adding commentary, TikTokers layering in sad violin music, and Gen Z turning it into dance memes, creating not just a viral clip but an entire content ecosystem. Every blink, every fidget from Sunny's on-air appearance was now monetized, memed, and looped into countless formats. And the most brutal part was that she never screamed or lost her temper. Her breakdown wasn't loud, it was silent and real, the kind of unraveling you just can't fake. And in today's internet, that's blood in the water, because viewers don't need a chair thrown to call it a meltdown. They just need that one look that says, "I wasn't ready for this," and that's exactly what she gave them. Then came the apology. Not a press conference, not a teary camera moment, but a carefully worded line slipped into the next broadcast of The View, where Sunny said she didn't like being judged by assumptions and admitted she had done just that. To the students at the Turning Point USA Summit, offering a quiet "my bad." But by then, it was far too late, because outside the studio, the internet had already exploded, with conservative blogs calling it a cultural victory and Kirk's fans celebrating like they had just won the Super Bowl. Reaction videos spliced, Sunny's discomfort into looped montages, and one creator even added flames behind her, calling it the crash of credibility. It was everywhere. TikTok users turned her facial expressions into meme templates, and one viral edit had her blinking layered over a dubstep remix. It wasn't just commentary anymore. it was entertainment. And Sunny Hostin, whether she liked it or not, had become the star of a digital train wreck. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk was glowing, not just because his argument landed, but because his platform had completely hijacked the story. Traditional media scrambled to catch up, issuing corrections and clarifications, but none of it mattered because the internet had already moved on, and Sunny had become the face of what happens when you underestimate how brutal, fast, and relentless meme culture really is. She apologized with dignity, but dignity doesn't go viral, humiliation does. And what made this all hit even harder was the fact that Charlie Kirk didn't win because he had the best argument or the most detailed facts. He won because he understood the rules of the new game. Sunny Hostin walked into that moment thinking it was still about logic, law degrees, and polished delivery. But in 2025, media battles are about who can create the most viral emotional moment, not who's right. Kirk didn't treat her like a media figure. He treated her like a Twitter handle. He stripped away all nuance, turned her into a symbol, and launched her into the algorithm like a flamethrower with a smug grin. And it worked. His video spread like wildfire. His fans turned it into GIFs, memes, even merchandise. At one point, people were selling t-shirts with her reaction face printed on the front. And Sunny, she was still trying to steer a daytime talk show, unaware that a storm had already hit. She came with legal analysis and moral clarity, but Kirk brought a meme war, and she brought a notepad. In today's media circus, the crowd doesn't want calm discussion, they want fireworks, and she learned that lesson the hard way, live on national TV, while the internet clipped her blinking into 1,000 viral edits. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't even the same sport. This wasn't about ideas anymore. It was about survival in a digital coliseum where only one thing matters: who gets the crowd to cheer. And the crowd, oh, they were cheering for blood. While Sunny Hostin tried to regain control of her image, the internet ran wild, with commentators analyzing every pause in her voice and every awkward glance, while entire YouTube channels broke down her segment frame by frame like a political autopsy. At that point, it didn't matter what she said. What mattered was how shaken she looked, and that's the cruel truth of today's media landscape, because image is everything, and if you flinch on camera, you don't just lose the argument, you become the argument, and Sunny flinched. Charlie Kirk didn't need to be on set, didn't need a debate stage. He pulled off the digital version of a drone strike, remote, precise, and devastating, hitting her where it hurt the most, her reputation. Her carefully crafted brand of intelligence, poise, and credibility cracked on camera, and the internet made sure it never stopped playing. For years, Sunny represented a liberal confidence, calm, articulate, grounded in values, but none of that matters when your facial expressions are turned into TikToks with clown music. You can be right and still lose because the crowd isn't scoring facts, they're scoring reactions. And now her breakdown wasn't just a moment, it was a viral template, a meme factory, a 5-second loop that erased years of professionalism. The damage was done, and the internet never forgets. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, it did, because once something like this catches fire online, it doesn't just burn, it spreads. Sunny Hostin's stumble didn't remain a headline or a trending clip, it turned into a full-blown content goldmine. TikTokers, Instagram meme pages, reaction YouTubers, they all swarmed in like vultures at an all-you-can-eat outrage buffet. One creator layered her reaction with circus music, another turned her pause into a meme called the Blinking Breakdown, and influencers who probably think Karl Marx is a TikTok dance were suddenly breaking down the ethics of daytime TV. It became a viral moment so massive that even people who hadn't seen the original segment felt like they had. Meanwhile, Kirk was cruising on digital autopilot, no need to reply again. His fan base was doing the work for him, reposting, stitching, remixing, while The View scrambled behind the scenes, releasing careful follow-ups and legal clarifications. They explained that Turning Point USA never invited or supported the neo-Nazi protesters, and that security even tried to remove them, but it didn't matter. The internet doesn't care about retractions or context, it cares about impact, and Sunny's on-air unraveling had already been screenshotted, saved, and locked into meme culture forever. So now we arrive at the part no one on The View was prepared for, the collapse of an entire media strategy. For years, shows like this thrived on a proven formula. Speak calmly, look educated, sprinkle in legal jargon, and the audience would nod along, but that formula is broken. Sunny Hostin brought law school logic to a meme war, and that's why she got flattened. The internet doesn't reward careful reasoning, it rewards chaos. And when Charlie Kirk dropped his response, it wasn't for fact checkers, it was built for virality. He didn't come with policy papers, he came with punchy lines, visuals, and edits that made people stop scrolling.